into in terms of what's going into your pocket every month. Okay? And then you have to say, well, I know I have to save 10% because, you know, that's what I was told, so 10%'s gone on top of that. And then you've got this amount of money left. And when you start looking at things like, where am I going to live, what car am I going to buy, you know how much you've got to spend, and that's going to dictate your spending decisions. Now, if you don't take the 10% off first, you're going to live in a probably slightly nicer place, drive a slightly nicer car, so then it wouldn't work. So it's really a matter of discipline, right? And what your priorities are. Yes?
Where would you invest to get a guaranteed 7% back?
Guarantee, okay, where would you invest?
If looking at this chart, this sort of table with the person's getting 7%.
Yes. That's a great question. And the question is, where would you invest to get a guaranteed 7%? And the answer is, there is no place I can guarantee you 7%. However, if you have a well-diversified portfolio, and we're going to talk about certain types of investments and how we do that, historically the stock markets return 10 or 11% a year. But that doesn't mean you're going to get 10 or 11% every year. There are going to be years where you're going to get 20%, and there are going to be years where you're going to lose 20%. But this, if over 20 years, 30 years, it averages out to 7%, is more or less what it would result in. So unfortunately, you can't guarantee 7% return every year. But what you can do is invest in a well-diversified, hopefully low-cost portfolio that will average out to a reasonable rate of return. But that's a good question. Okay, so if you have a higher interest rate, you're obviously going to earn more, right? But in order to get that higher interest rate, what do you need to be willing to do? Yes? Invest more or, yes, be riskier, take more risk. Okay? So you could say, you know what, I'm 20 years old when you start saving, or hopefully even earlier than that. I have 40 years before I'm going to need this money, and I'm willing to take a lot of risk because it doesn't bother me if I see my portfolio going up really high and down like this. Okay? That's what risk is, volatility. So just up and down, up and down. And for some people, you know what, this money I don't need, I'm not going to use it until I retire. I'm not concerned if there's a lot of volatility, right? But what about if you need the money 6 months from now for a house? Then you're concerned about volatility. You're not going to take risk with that. So when you're thinking about your portfolio and your time horizon and if you can sleep at night, right? Some people look at their statements and check online every single day. What is my account doing? If you're that type of person, maybe you can't take a lot of risk. But if you know you have a good portfolio, it's well diversified, it's low cost, and it doesn't bother you to see ups and downs, then you can afford to take on more risk, and hopefully that will translate into higher rate of return, which means more money at the end, right? Have you heard of the rule of 72? Yes. Oh, good. Okay, so you already did this. You guys have talked about this. Good. If you look on page 32, it just gives you an example for those of you who have not heard of the rule of 72. Okay? If you want to figure out how long it's going to take for you to double your money, it's very simple. You take 72 divided by the rate of interest, and it tells you how many years it's going to take. Okay? So if I have $10,000 and I'm going to earn 6%, and back to the question of where can you guarantee me 6%? Well, not too many places, unfortunately, or no place. Well, you know what? That's not true. If you buy a savings bond, a corporate bond, it's not guaranteed, but if you have a 6% rate of return on a corporate bond, first of all, do you know what a bond is? Okay. A bond, for those of you who don't know, is simply an IOU. Okay? Basically, what that means is someone needs to raise money, whether it's the U.S. government bond, a corporation needs to raise money. They basically sell bonds, and we decide we're going to buy them. So we're the investors. We have $5,000. The U.S. government decides it needs to build some roads, okay? So it needs to raise some money. Sells you a piece of paper. You give me, the government, $5 grand. In return, I'm going to give you interest, right? Because you're only going to give me money if I give you something. So let's say I'm going to pay you 6%. So every 6 months, I'm going to pay you 6%, or it's a 6% annual rate. So you'll get half of that every 6 months. And then at the end of the term of the bond, so let's say it's a 5-year bond, what do you get back? Yes?
$5,000 plus the interest.
Right. That $5,000 that you initially lent them plus that last interest payment. Okay? Now, if you buy a U.S. government bond, do you think the interest rate is going to be high or low relative to, let's say, a corporation's bond? Yes?
Low.
Low? Why?
Doesn't it depend how much money the government needs?
Does it depend on how much money the government needs? Not necessarily, no. Yes?
Well, the government's pretty stable, so the person knows you're going to get the interest back, but a corporate bond, you don't know, maybe perhaps the company would go bankrupt or something.
Exactly. Government is very stable. You said pretty stable, but government is very stable. Corporation, meaning you know you're going to get your money back from the U.S. government, right? Because let's say the U.S. government runs out of money. What do? Print more. Here you go. Here's your interest payment, right? Or they tax us more. They're going to have money. Because of that, you're not taking a risk. When you buy a U.S. government bond, they're not going to default. You know you're going to get your money, so you're right. The interest is going to be low relative to a company that is possibly going to go out of business. You don't know if your money is going to get paid back. What are they going to have to do to provide you with an incentive to give you money, to give the company money? Higher interest rate. Well, you have a choice between giving your $5,000 to the U.S. government, and you know you're getting that 5%. If I want that $5,000, how much more interest am I going to have to pay to get that person to give it to me? Because they're not really sure they're going to get it back. Well, maybe I'll pay 8%. Okay, so back to the question of that guaranteed 6% rate of return, there are probably some corporate bonds paying 6%, but it's a matter of it's not guaranteed because the fact of the matter is a company can always default on the bond. Right? But if it's a big, well-established company and it's a fairly short-term bond, you're pretty guaranteed you're going to get your money back. Okay? So what happens if you are able to increase that rate of interest? 72 divided by 9, it takes 8 years to double your money. Right? So see how amazing that is? It drops it by 4 if you're able to increase that rate of interest by 3%. So obviously it's very important to get the highest rate of return possible. Okay? All right, so let's talk about some savings and investments. Okay, so when you're thinking about saving and investing your money, two major things that you want to be aware of, one of which we've talked about a little bit already, which is general rise of prices, inflation, okay? Because like I said, if your money doesn't even keep pace with inflation, then you're not making any money. So you really want to be aware of that. What's another thing you really want to be aware of when you're investing your money? Taxes. Why is that? That's right. You're basically going to be paying a portion of what you earn in taxes. Is that always the case? If you invest money, let's say you invest $1,000 and you make $50 over the course of the year. Do you always have to report the $50 on your tax return that you made? Yes? Okay, what do you think the exception to that would be? 401ks? Whole life policies. There are some bonds that are tax exempt. IRAs. Okay? So if you put money into a tax-deferred account and you make $50 in that account over the course of the year, you don't have to pay any of that to the government. When do you have to start paying that to the government? Yeah. When you take it out. That's right. Now, there's an exception to that about when you have to start paying the taxes. How many of you have heard of a Roth IRA? A Roth IRA is a retirement account. Okay? When you put money into a Roth IRA, you don't get what's called an upfront tax deduction, which is what you were referencing, meaning it doesn't reduce your current tax liability. But if you earn money in that Roth IRA, you don't have to pay taxes on it, on the earnings, and you never have to pay taxes again on that money once it's in an IRA, a Roth IRA. Meaning that money will grow, the interest will compound, you never have to pay $1 of taxes once that money is in a Roth IRA account. Okay? Yes?
Is there like a special need for that?
A special reason for that? Well, the government's trying to encourage people to save for retirement. And there are some income limitations, so some of your parents may make too much money to actually participate in a Roth IRA, but